Hi everybody, and welcome to the Bookhouse. Incarceron by Catherine Fisher is one of those books that has two separate storylines going at once. Two different stories, two different characters in completely different places, and yes, of course, by the middle of the book those two stories start to converge in really fascinating ways, and by the end they come together in a way that will blow your mind. Finn is about 17 years old, and he lives in Incarceron, a vast prison made up of tunnels and hallways and caverns and whole cities where tribes and families of people roam around preying on one another and trying to just scrape out a basic existence. Claudia, on the other hand, lives in this gorgeous mansion on this lush, lavish estate, kind of like she's living in the middle of a Jane Austen novel. Finn can only remember back about 3 or 4 years. Nobody else really remembers Finn from before that time either. Finn is convinced he came from the outside. Most people who live in Incarceron aren't even convinced there is an outside. They think that's an urban legend, a myth. At first it seems like Claudia is living in some past century, but pretty soon we discover that her society is actually pretty technologically advanced, although nobody ever gets to see or use any of that technology because of protocol with a capital P, a decree from several hundred years ago where everyone is forced to live as though it is the past in this supposedly more peaceful and idyllic time. One of the things I really enjoyed about Incarceron, a beautifully written book by Catherine Fisher, is that each chapter starts with a little excerpt from some sort of legend or literature or letter or political decree from the dual world of Incarceron and the outside, although they're not documents that relate specifically to the story at hand. And so, on one hand, they're confusing, but they also shed little glimmers of light on the story that we're following. Although Finn is in Incarceron and Claudia's on the outside, it occurred to me as I continued to read this book that really both of them are in a prison of sorts. Finn, of course, but Claudia too. She lives in this highly structured society where her father's fairly important, and she's about to be married off in an arranged marriage to a guy she totally can't stand, all for political purposes for her father and the Queen. They're scheming to get their kids together for political purposes. I've got to warn you, Incarceron ends on a giant cliffhanger, and it's a really good place to stop, but at the same time, it's a frustrating place to stop. Thankfully, there's a sequel, Sapphique, and it's already out. I'm headed to read it next, and if you plan to read Incarceron, I'd have Sapphique ready to go right next to it, because you won't want to miss it. Keep reading, Bookhousers.